Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be tackling something pretty fascinating. I think you'll agree.
Absolutely.
The whole world of, how our thoughts and feelings kind of work together, that whole cognition and emotion thing.
Yep.
We're going to be looking at an excerpt from the Handbook of Cognition and Emotion.
Okay.
It's edited by Dalgleish
Right.
and Mick Power, and it's really packed with insights from experts.
Oh, yeah. It really does highlight, the complexity of being a human.
Oh, yeah.
And we often think about thinking and feeling as these totally separate things,
Right.
but,
Yeah.
they're so connected.
Yeah, and this handbook really emphasizes that.
Yeah.
One of the things that kind of jumped out at me right away was
Yeah.
how our memories aren't just, those cold, hard facts.
Right.
They're really colored by how we felt at the time.
Oh, absolutely. And the handbook dives into that and talks about how, when something really intense happens,
Right.
whether it's good or bad,
Yeah.
those memories are going to stick around.
Oh, for sure. Like, I can still remember how I felt when I got my acceptance letter to college, but I'm sure there are a million other little details from that day that are just gone.
Exactly. And it's almost like those really emotionally charged moments, they get fast-tracked in our memories,
Uh,
you know? And the handbook goes even deeper than just saying emotions affect memory. It actually breaks down how different emotions affect the way we remember things.
oh, that's interesting. So it's not just a general statement, there's actually differences.
Exactly. Different emotions play different roles. For example, when we're anxious,
Right.
our attention narrows and we focus on things that could be threats.
Okay.
So we might remember things related to that anxiety, but forget other things that were happening.
So it's not just that we remember emotional events better, it's that how we felt actually changes what we remember about it.
You got it. It's like each emotion is a filter,
Yeah.
highlighting some things and hiding others.
That's really profound when you think about it.
Yeah.
Does this apply to all emotions, or are some better at shaping memories than others?
That's a good question. And the handbook actually looks into that.
Okay.
It seems like emotions that really hit us physically, like fear or joy,
Right.
those have a bigger impact on how our memories form.
That makes sense because when your heart is racing or you feel that rush of excitement, it's like your whole body's in on it.
Exactly. And those sensations can actually make memories stronger.
Wow.
It's like your brain is saying, hey, this is important. Remember this.
So just to make sure I'm with you, emotions and memory, they're totally intertwined.
Yeah.
And different emotions actually change what we remember about something.
Mm-hmm.
And the big, intense emotions, especially if our body's involved, those are the real memory makers.
Nailed it. You've really summed up what the handbook is saying
Yeah.
about how complex the link between emotions and memory is.
This is making me rethink all sorts of memories now. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember things and wondering if my emotions at the time changed how I see them now.
It's amazing, isn't it? It really makes you question your own experiences and see them in a new way.
Yeah.
And there's another layer to this. The handbook also talks about how we're feeling right now can actually change how we remember things from the past.
Wait, so you're saying if I'm feeling down today, I'm more likely to remember bad things?
Not necessarily specific bad memories, but our mood can be like a filter, changing how we see and understand those past experiences.
Okay, so if I'm in a good mood, I might look back at something tough and focus on the good parts or what I learned. But if I'm feeling down, I might only remember the bad stuff.
Exactly, you got it.
And-
It's not that our memories are changing, it's just that our mood affects how we access them and understand them.
Wow, that's pretty mind-boggling. So our emotions are constantly shaping how we see our own past.
And that's just the start. There's so much more in the handbook about how emotions affect other things, like making decisions, paying attention, even being creative.
Okay, I'm hooked. This is really making me rethink how our thoughts and feelings connect. Before we move on, can we unpack this memory thing a bit more? I'm curious, does the handbook talk about how we can use all of this? Like, what does it mean for us day to day?
It does, and it offers some really interesting perspectives on that. But maybe that's a good place to pick up next time.
Alrighty, can't wait. We'll be back to explore how all this amazing research on emotion and memory can actually help us understand ourselves better and navigate the world around us. So we were talking about how our emotions can really shape those memories, right? Not just in the moment, but even when we're looking back on stuff.
Right.
And I'm really curious about what the handbook says about like the practical side of all this. Like
Yeah.
how can we use this knowledge in everyday life?
That's a great question, and the handbook really tackles that head on.
Okay.
One of the big takeaways for me is that understanding this whole emotion-memory connection can be really empowering.
Okay. Empowering how?
Well, think about it. If we know how our emotions are affecting our memories, we can start to question those memories and maybe even see them differently.
So instead of being controlled by our emotional memories, we can actually take charge.
Exactly. Let's say you have a memory of giving a presentation at work, and it went totally wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you think about it, you get all anxious and embarrassed, and it makes you feel like you're just bad at public speaking.
Ouch. Yeah, I think we've all been there at some point.
But if you understand that those strong emotions might be making the memory seem worse than it was,
Okay.
you can start to look at it more objectively.
Mm.
Maybe it wasn't a total disaster.
Yeah.
Maybe there were parts that went well, or maybe you learned something valuable from it.
So it's like taking a step back and seeing the memory without all that emotional baggage.
Exactly, and that can be incredibly freeing. It lets you separate from those emotions and see what really happened.
That makes sense. But I imagine that's easier said than done, right? How do you actually change a memory that's so connected to a strong emotion?
It definitely takes effort and practice. The handbook actually talks about cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, as a really helpful approach in these situations.
Okay, for those of us who aren't therapists, what exactly is CBT?
It's a type of therapy that focuses on changing negative thoughts and behaviors. When it comes to emotional memories, CBT can help you challenge those automatic negative thoughts that pop up when you remember something difficult.
So instead of just accepting that I'm terrible at public speaking because of that one presentation, CBT would help me question that thought and see if it's really true.
Exactly. It helps you develop a more realistic perspective. You might start to see that, yeah, the presentation wasn't perfect, but it didn't make you a terrible public speaker. It was just one experience, and there are probably other times where you've communicated really well.
So it's like shifting your focus from those emotionally charged memories to a more balanced view of your abilities.
Got it. And over time, that can make those memories less intense emotionally.
This is amazing. It's like we have the power to change how those emotional memories affect us.
And that's just one example of how understanding this connection between emotions and memory can be so empowering. The handbook also talks about how this knowledge can help us make better decisions, communicate more effectively, and even boost our creativity.
Okay, I'm definitely ready to hear more about that. Let's start with decision making. How do emotions fit in there? I always hear people say you should make decisions with your head, not your heart.
That's a common misconception.
Mm.
Emotions aren't just these irrational things that mess up our judgment. They actually give us important information that can help us make better choices.
Really? I always thought emotions were something to keep in check when making big decisions.
Of course, we need to be aware of how emotions can sometimes lead us down the wrong path, especially when they're really strong.
Right.
But a lot of times our emotions are telling us something important that we need to pay attention to.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say you're thinking about taking a new job. On paper, it looks amazing. More money, more responsibility, a fancy title. But something just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
You have this uneasy feeling you can't shake.
I've totally been there. It's like that gut feeling that something's off, even if you can't explain why.
Exactly. That gut feeling is an emotional response. And it's often based on your past experiences, your intuition and things your subconscious is picking up on. It might be telling you that something about the company, the work, or even your own goals isn't lining up with what you really want.
So instead of ignoring that feeling or trying to talk myself out of it, I should actually pay attention to it and try to understand what it means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you should make a decision based only on that feeling,
Mm.
but it's important information you shouldn't ignore. It's worth exploring.
Huh.
Maybe talk to people who work at the company, do some research, or just give yourself more time to think about those feelings and figure out what they're trying to tell you.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like recognizing that emotions are part of making decisions, not something to completely separate from the process.
Precisely. And often our emotions are picking up on subtle things that our conscious mind might miss.
So it's not about letting emotions totally control our decisions, but about using them as information to help us make better choices.
You got it. And the handbook goes even further, suggesting that emotions can actually make us better decision makers in certain situations.
Wait, really? How?
Well, think about it. Emotions help us figure out what's really important to us. They guide our attention and motivate us to take action. They give us a sense of urgency and direction, which can be really helpful when we have tough choices to make.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how emotions can be helpful in decision making, but I'm also wondering how this applies to more personal stuff like communication and relationships.
That's a great question and a really important part of this whole discussion. The way we express and understand emotions is at the core of how we connect with others. But maybe we should save that for the next part.
Okay, you've definitely got me curious. We'll come back and explore how understanding our emotions can help us build stronger, more meaningful relationships. So we've talked about how emotions can shape our memories and decisions, but I'm really curious about what the handbook says about emotions in relationships and communication.
Yeah, that's such a huge part of being human.
Yeah.
I mean, just think about it. Our ability to get each other's emotions. It's
Right.
like the foundation of having good relationships.
It's so true. And it's one of those things you don't really think about until it goes wrong.
Right.
Like when there's a miscommunication or someone totally misreads you.
Exactly. And the handbook actually gets into some really interesting research on how our own feelings
Okay.
can actually change how we see other people's emotions.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it's
Mhm.
not just about recognizing what someone else is feeling, but our own emotions might be affecting how we interpret it.
Exactly.
Mm.
The handbook talks about a study where people were shown pictures of faces expressing different emotions.
Okay.
And they found that people who were feeling anxious themselves
Right.
were more likely to see neutral faces as like threatening or hostile.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. It's like our own anxiety is getting projected onto other people, even if they're not actually feeling that way.
It's a subtle effect,
Mm.
but it's really powerful. And it shows us how important it is to be aware of our own emotions,
Yeah.
especially when we're trying to understand someone else.
So it's like we need to check in with ourselves first, make sure our own feelings aren't clouding things before we try to figure out what someone else is feeling.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's all about developing that emotional self-awareness,
Right.
so we can come into these interactions with a clearer head.
That makes a lot of sense, but it also sounds super challenging. How do we actually get better at that self-awareness?
It's definitely a journey, not a quick fix,
Right.
but the handbook does offer some helpful tips. One is to simply pay more attention to what's happening in your body and the emotional cues you're getting.
So like noticing if my heart is racing or if I'm feeling tense.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Those physical sensations are often our body's way of saying, hey, you're feeling something,
Uh-huh.
even if we haven't consciously realized it yet.
Okay, so first we tune into those physical signs. Then what?
Then, try to name the emotion you're experiencing. Is it anxiety, frustration,
Right.
excitement?
Right.
Putting a label on it can help you make sense of it and figure out how to manage it.
It's like acknowledging it instead of just letting it fester.
Exactly. And once you've figured out what you're feeling, you can start to think about what might be causing it.
Yeah.
Is it something in this specific situation, or is it something that's been building up?
So it's like being an emotion detective trying to track down the source.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's all about being curious and compassionate towards yourself, trying to really understand your own emotions.
This is also insightful, but I'm also thinking about how this applies to actual communication.
Yeah.
How can this understanding of emotions help us talk to each other better?
That's a great question, and the handbook really emphasizes empathy and communication.
Okay, so empathy, that ability to understand and share someone else's feelings.
Right.
I know it's important, but sometimes it's hard to actually do it.
It definitely takes effort, but it starts with that self-awareness we were talking about.
Right.
The better you are at tuning into your own emotions, the better you'll be at recognizing and understanding other people's emotions too.
That makes sense. It's like you need to understand your own emotional language before you can truly understand someone else's.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about recognizing the emotion itself, but also trying to get why they're feeling that way.
Okay.
What are their needs? What's the context?
So instead of just reacting to someone's anger, for example,
Yeah,
I might try to understand what's making them feel so angry.
exactly. Maybe they're feeling stressed or unheard or disrespected. By trying to see things from their perspective,
Yeah.
you can respond in a way that's more compassionate and helpful.
It's like going beyond the surface and really trying to see things through their eyes, even if you don't agree with their reaction.
That's the core of empathy. It's not about saying their behavior is okay, but about trying to understand where it's coming from.
This whole conversation has really changed how I think about emotions.
And that's the power of this handbook. It doesn't just tell us about the science of emotions.
Yeah.
It really encourages us to use this knowledge to improve our own lives and relationships.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you'd want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that emotions aren't just these fleeting things that come and go.
Right.
They're a fundamental part of who we are, how we think, how we remember, how we make decisions, and how we connect with each other.
Yeah.
By understanding how powerful emotions are, we can become more self-aware, more empathetic, and ultimately live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
That's a fantastic way to sum it all up, and it really resonates with me. So for everyone listening, I encourage you to keep exploring this connection between thinking and feeling.
Yeah?
Check out the full Handbook of Cognition and Emotion. Pay attention to your own emotional world and see how these insights can change how you understand yourself and the world around you.
It's a journey of self-discovery that's well worth taking, and I think this is just the beginning of our exploration.